But I'm going to speak about what's writing, which is the next set of malachas that goes into how to make the building of the base of the Mishkan. So just to start from the beginning, and then the basic framework will speak about what is the malacha, and then we'll try to get to some practical applications of the malacha. So we know at the beginning of Parshas Vayakal, the pasuk says, "Vayakal Moshe kol hadas b'nei Yisrael." Moshe gathers in all the Jewish people, and he tells them, "Eila advarim asher tziva Hashem lasos asam." These are the things that you were commanded to do. Sheishes yamim teyasim malacha. You should work for 7 days. V'yom hashvi yilachem kodesh Shabbos and Hashem kol ha'osim malacha yumas. 6 days you do work. The 7th day you don't do work. Don't do any malacha. We don't know what malacha is, but we have a hint in the pasuk how many malachas there are. Because the Gemara darshans Eila Hadvarim, from the word Eila and Hadvarim, we could surmise that there are 39 malachas. Well, how do we get there? Because the Aleph is Gematria 1, Lamed 30, Hey is 36 from the word Eila, and Hadvarim, the Hey of Hadvarim is 1, and Devarim is a plural, so it's 2, so you have 36 and 3, that's how you get 39 malachas. That's what the Bavli says.
Did you get all that?
Yeah.
You all got that? I'm the only one that needs a map, huh?
So why
okay.
not the Marim don't do the Gematria, but you do 1 and 2? Like,
what do you mean?
Like Ela, you do the Gematria, and then have the Marim, you say Hey is 1, and it's plural, it's 2 more. It's a strange calculation.
So we know Devarim, I'll tell you a different one. I'll explain to you after why some words we do Gematria. I'll show you Blina de Ramban.
Okay.
He discusses when we use gematrias, when we don't use gematrias. It's actually an interesting topic, but it's like 40 minutes.
It's not our topic.
And I'll show you, after Ramban, who discusses this question. The Yerushalmi has 2 different approaches, also using gematria. He says a little different. Eila again is 36. We have the Aleph and the Hey is 6, and the Lamed is 30. And then you have Davar is 1, and Devarim is an additional 2. And so instead of using the Hey of Hadavarim, it uses the word Davar, Devarim, to get you 3. And then the last one is just I found the most fascinating one. The word Eila itself equals 39. So if you thought you had trouble up until now, you're really in big trouble. Because how do you get Eila to equal 39? So the Aleph is 1, so far so good. Lamed is 30, so we're at 31. And then Hey is 5, so we're at 36. So Yerushalmi says there's a rule in drashas that certain letters could be switched with other letters. If they come from the same place in the mouth, there's certain rules on how to make a drasha.
I'm sorry, if they come from the same place?
Same place, meaning there are 5 places. When you say a letter, let's say a mem, comes from the lips. A ches comes from the throat. The different places where letters are, the sound of each letter is made. So there are 5 different places in the mouth. There's the lips, the teeth, the tongue, the throat, and the 5th one, I think it's the back of the throat. So the 5 different places. So if you have the letters coming from the sound of each letter coming from the same, they're interchangeable. So Hey and Ches come from the same place of the mouth. So Ches is 8. You have 31 and 8 gets 39. So now we know there are 39. How do
you know you take Ches? Maybe you take another one from the lips, and it doesn't.
That's it. We'll get to from the next part. We'll know that it can't be more than that.
What about the words? You can have 3 words. We'll make it 39.
Well, how do you get 3 words?
3 letters.
Yeah.
3 letters. Eila is 36.
That rule.
3 letters.
So that rule in Gematria, just short, is that we never take. We don't add up letters, but we only add a complete word, because the lumdus of adding a word, which seems a bit arbitrary, is if you take, let's say, the letters of Shulchan. So you have Shin, Lamed, Ches, Nun. So that tells you those are the letters of Shulchan. But it's like different parts of a table. I have the legs of the table and the top of the table. But if I put the letter Shulchan together, then I get a complete table. So it's a new concept, the word Shulchan. So I can't take letters, but I could take all the collection of letters to add another thing. That's how you get 39. So we're at 39 malachas. But how do I know what constitutes a malacha? It's talking a malacha. What about setting the table? For certain people, that could be a malacha. What constitutes a malacha? So the Rashi over there says, what is this pasuk discussing? These pasukim are discussing building the Mishkan. So we have a pasuk that says don't do malacha. We have another pasuk that says don't build the Mishkan. So we could surmise anything that's involved in building the Mishkan can't be done on Shabbos. So the Mishkan will be our paradigm for what's Asur on Shabbos. So whatever is involved in building the Mishkan will be Asur on Shabbos. So therefore, what now we have to do is find Kosev, since we're going to be speaking about writing and a little bit about erasing, where do we find Kosev in the Mishkan? That's our job. We know it's very easy. We know where sewing's involved. We know Potseya from last couple weeks ago, where these are involved in the Mishkan. Where does Kosev, where do you find Kosev in the Mishkan?
Which means writing.
Writing.
You mark the strips of wood too.
Where they go.
Right, so that's very good. So it's brought down. The way we know it is they used to mark the different beams. Right, the Mishkan wasn't made out of planks, but it was made out of beams. So how do you know the order of each of the beams? So they write Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, and they would connect Aleph with Aleph, Beis, Gimel with Gimel, and then we know all these beams, and then they would connect it together with the poles. Right. So that's how you know where. That's where you find building in the Mishkan. I'm sorry, writing in the Mishkan. And just like you have by a sukkah, right? There's man-made sukkahs. If you don't have it, that was the only difference between the Mishkan and the sukkah, right? The Mishkan, any beam could go anywhere, but the sukkah, if you mess up with the number system, you won't have a sukkah that year. But that was the Mishkan. Where do you find mochek? You find if they made a mistake in the lettering. Let's say they wrote Aleph, Beis, Dalet accidentally, so they missed Gimel, so they would erase the Dalet and write the Gimel. And that's where you found, so you have the ksiva by marking the boards, and mechika, if they made a mistake, they would erase the letter that they wrote erroneously, and they would then rewrite the proper letter. And that's how you have mechika and ksiva. Just as the Avnei Nezer says a little different approach. Every time something was donated, they would write down what was donated. And that was where you find writing. And I guess, again, erasing if they made a mistake in things. So that's where you find it in the Mishkan. The Mishnah in Mesechus Shabbos goes through all the 39 malachas, and it says, Avos malachas arba'im chaserachas. There are 39 malachas. What are they? And it lists them. Hazareya, planting, plowing, harvesting, and it goes through each one. Then it says Kosev. Ha-Kosev shtei osya. Someone who writes 2 letters. V'hamochek al manas lichtov shtei osya. So one who erases something in order to write 2 letters. Then it continues. Who builds? Someone who destroys, lights a fire, puts out a fire. It goes through all the malachas. Tosfos right away jumps in. He says the Mishnah is not consistent, because if you go through, we saw Hazareya, one who plants. It doesn't say how much he has to plant. Choresh doesn't tell me how much he has to plow. Dash doesn't tell me how much he has to winnow. All of a sudden we get to sewing and writing. Hakosef shtei osios. He has to write 2 letters. So ask Tosfos. He doesn't even give an answer, but he says, Sarach lafarish, you have to give an explanation. Maybe you're going to tell me that no other malacha has a shear, and what the Mishnah is telling me, what the amount that's necessary, what's in order to be over that malacha. I'll tell you that's not true, because the Gemara in many different places tells us that a person who carries something outside, in order for him to be taking something from one domain to a second domain, it has to be a shear of a grogros. Anything less than, I believe it's a fig, a size of a fig, he won't be chayiv at all. So that means there are other malachos have a shear. If you look, it says hamotzi mirishus l'rishus. It doesn't say hamotzi grogros mirishus l'rishus. It just says someone who takes out from one domain to another without giving the shear. So it says Tosfos sarach lafarish lama pirish kan ubaoreg u'potzei v'tofer shear tvei mi b'shar. Why by these malachos does the Mishnah give a shear, and by the other malachos the Mishnah doesn't give a shear, doesn't give an amount? And Tosfos says you have to explain it, and then he leaves it at that. So we see this inconsistency. We see Tosfos ask the question, but we don't have an explanation. So there's a sefer, which is just important to understand what is ksiva, what is the malach of ksiva. There's a sefer from Mordechai Bennett, the Magen Avos, who goes through all the malachas, and he says, I'll tell you what's the difference between ksiva and, let's say, planting and winnowing. I'll tell you the difference. He says, based on just the terms, it's chatzi malacha and chatzi shir, which means, let's say, a person's not allowed to eat an animal that wasn't shechted. Now, if he eats a kazayas of that, the size of an olive, the volume of an olive of that animal that wasn't shechted, then he would get malchus. But if he would eat less than that, he would still have done an avera. A person's not allowed to eat this. If he does eat, he won't be chayiv until he eats a certain amount. That's the concept called chatzi shir. It's not enough to be considered to have done a chashava thing. You have, in order to be chayiv, you have to do a chashava act, a significant act, and in order to do a significant act, you have to do a certain amount. So let's say for eating an animal that wasn't shafted, or eating something that forbidden fats, then a person, the isser is to eat. Now, in order to be chayiv, to be liable, he would have to do a significant act. The significant act is considered to be eating a kazayas, a volume of an olive.
So what would the punishment then would be in Shemayim? Not
Shemayim, yeah.
Right.
But yeah,
Sorry, it's chatzi shir, it's half a shir.
that's half. You only did half a shir.
Half the kazais?
Half the kazayas. Anything less than half the anything less than a kazayas. Chasi just means like part of the shir.
Right.
Doesn't have to be literal.
Oh.
So Shabbos also we find that. So let's say someone carries out from one domain to another domain. He carries out less than we said was a gross. He carries out, say, a half a grape. That's smaller than the size of a fig. So he's done he was over the malach of carrying from one domain to another domain, but he wouldn't be liable because he didn't do a significant act of carrying. Then we have another concept, what's called chatzi malacha. There's a Pri Megadim who asks a shaila like this. The first Mishnah in Shabbos says that if a person that hotzah, carrying from one domain to a second domain, involves two steps. There's picking up something and putting it down somewhere else. So if a person picks up something, and let's say in a private domain, and places it down in a public domain, then he has transgressed the malacha of carrying. What would happen, says the Pri Megadim, if a person picks up and goes to the other domain, doesn't put it down, or he finds it something floating in the air and he takes it and puts it down, but he doesn't do both steps. He only does picking up without placing down, or placing down without picking up. Pri Megadim wants to argue he hasn't done anything. The malacha is picking up. If you just think about it, every time a guy picks up, let's say he wants to drink something, he picks it up and puts something down. You could argue he did half of malacha because he picked up something. So says the Pri Megadim, of course he wouldn't be chayiv. He hasn't done the malacha at all. Okay, these are the things. So that's the concept of chatzi shir. Chatzi shir is I did the act that was forbidden, but I didn't eat enough or do enough to make it a significant act. And then there's chatzi malacha. I did half of a malacha, I didn't do a complete malacha, and therefore I haven't done anything.
So there's 0 punishment.
No problem, you didn't do anything wrong. So says the Magen Avos, the Mishnah is telling you, anytime it says something in the Mishnah, it says an amount, let's say someone who writes 2 letters, if a person would write one single letter, it's not the pshat that he did the isser of ksiva, that he wrote on Shabbos, but he won't be liable because he didn't do a significant act. He hasn't done anything. And therefore the Mishnah has to tell me an amount, because it's defining what each malacha is. A person who writes 2 letters has done the malacha of ksiva. But a person who hasn't done anything, who wrote only one single letter, he hasn't done anything, and it's perfectly okay.
It's no different than the other case you just gave us.
Right, no different than a guy who picks up in one domain and doesn't place it down in the other domain. He hasn't done anything. Yeah. So therefore, the Mishnah has to tell us a shir, because it has to tell us what the malacha is. The malacha is writing 2 letters. Anything less than that, he hasn't done anything.
Wow. We don't hold by that today.
Well, it could be derabanan. That would be derabanan. Maybe it would be a problem. Anyways, you can't pick up a pen. It's muksa.
You can write in the snow with your finger.
That's anyways could be derabanan, since it's not lasting. The only time you rechayiv midaraisa is if it lasts. If it's like a long lasting. So that's.
I read that the shir of 2 letters, because the 2 beans work together, so you would write the letters,
Right.
both beans. But then, according to the Abnei Neser, what's the reason for the shir of 2 letters?
Well, because could be just a thought. Okay, I don't know what he would say, but let's say if you write, let's say they got 5 coins of gold. So let's say you write the number 5. 5 what? 5 doesn't have any meaning. So you have to write 5G to tell you 5 gold, or 5 Zion to tell you 5 Zahav. You would always have to write 2 letters to say what you're counting. Otherwise, it would have no meaning. So that was the first So that's the first thing. So it comes out according to Mordechai Bennett, the malach of ksiva is writing 2 letters. Anything less than that, you write 1 single letter, you haven't done a thing. Others argue.
There's no concept of chatzi shir then?
There's no, well, chatzi shir, it wouldn't be possible. It would be chatzi malacha.
There's no concept.
Chatzi malacha is okay. Only chatzi shir. You did the malacha, but not in a significant way. But if you do half of malacha, you do an akira, you pick up without putting down, you write 1 letter without a second letter.
You haven't completed the malacha.
You haven't completed the malacha.
Can you say you started the malacha? Or no, you can't even say that either, because it implies that you're in the midst of doing malacha.
Well,
so you haven't done anything.
Well, if you would write, let's say, 1 letter in the morning and another letter later on, we'll see. We'll get to it. We'll discuss the case. So then already, retroactively, you were involved in a malacha. But so long as you haven't finished it, then you haven't done anything. Let's say, the Pri Megadim discusses, let's say, carrying 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah. If you carry 2 amos, maybe that's nothing. It's only when you carry 4 amos. If you would carry another 2 amos, you'd be chayiv. But you have to carry 4 amos.
This particular idea also raises the question about a hefsek. Like if you draw 1 letter, you're still, I don't know how you could draw, but then you wait 7 hours. Does the hefsek undo the first letter?
Right.
For the relationship between the 2?
Right, so we'll get to it. It will become clear that the hefsek wouldn't make a difference.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Hatzi Malacha could be in someone holding the pen and another person moving the hand.
So that's a different concept. That's called 2 people who did a malacha. Yeah. So that would be a problem. Let's say if a child holds a pen and an adult writes with it, that may be the rabbanim, but that would be a problem. So that's his first concept. So that's the malach of ksiva. So I don't, if we have more time, we'll come back to this. So I heard this from a friend brought down Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, who has just also again, what is the malach of ksiva? I've found to be a fascinating shaila like this. Nowadays we have what's called carbon paper. So every time you go fill out a form, so you make 3 copies of that form, right? You write on 1 paper, and then it goes through, the lettering goes through 3 different papers.
That's not nowadays.
Nowadays?
It's the 1973.
That's all a computer.
No computer.
That's right.
Still only
Right.
1 letter.
I don't know, it's just by the, what's it called? By the Canadian, what's it called? I filled out a form in such a form. When I came here, when I imported a car, so I filled out such a form.
Canada Customs.
Canada
Still only
Customs.
wrote 1 letter.
So that's the shaila. That's mamish the shaila.
Because what if you write a letter and someone photocopies it?
Oh, that's exactly the
shaila.
shaila.
You wrote 2 letters, you didn't write 2 letters.
Oh, you're mamish on the ball. You got the shaila. So here's the shaila like this. So let me just speak it out, okay? Shaila's like this. So ask the heart's feel like this. I write a letter on that paper. Okay, so what did I do? I wrote a single letter. But I produced 5 letters. It went through the yellow paper, the pink paper, went through all the different color papers. So I wrote, but Lamaisa, all I did was write 1 letter. Is he chayav for ksiva? Based on the Magen Avos, it's a really gewaldige question, because what happened? If I wrote 1 letter, I haven't done anything. But if I wrote 2 letters, then it's chayav midaraisa. The shaila is really, did I do nothing wrong, or the person who wrote the letter chayav v'chatas? That's the shaila. How do we view, what is the malacha of ksiva, of writing on Shabbos? Is the malacha of writing a single letter, or is it producing? Is it writing 2 letters, or is it producing 2 letters?
Right.
Ask the Har Tzvi. So what is how would you be magdir? How would you define the malacha of ksiva? That's the Har Tzvi's question. So there's a note in the Har Tzvi. I think it's from his grandson. So his grandson, and just to make it in English, so you have the letter W. So if you take a W, we'll get there. So the grandson of the Har Tzvi brings a proof from a Gemara. He says it's a Gemara. What's the Gemara? The Gemara in Shabbos on Kuf Daled Amud Beis has a case like this. A person has the letter Ches. So if you look at the letter Ches in the Torah is either 2 Zions, or Vav and a Zion, it's 2 Zions. And it's connected by like a triangle on top that looks like a little roof. So says the grandson, what does the Gemara say? If a person would take an eraser and erase that little triangle on top, and then what would result? He would have a Vav and a Zion, or 2 Zions. What would the halacha be?
Did he make 2? Did he
made
produce
2 letters.
2, or did he make 1?
Oh, so that's my machine. The Gemara says he's chayiv. I'll read
Why should he be
He's chayiv.
He's chayiv, the Gemara
He
says.
didn't write anything.
He didn't write anything. So it says that's the whole proof, he says. He says, just take a look at this guy. All what did the guy do? He erased the ches. Or in our terms, he took a W, and a very thick W, and erased the line in the W and
So you got
produced two
V's.
U's.
Or 2 U's, right.
Or an M, and he made 2 N's. So he did that. So what did he do? He produced 2 letters. But he didn't even write anything, and yet the Gemara says in that case, he'd be chayiv, he'd be liable. So certainly, says the grandson of the Har Tzvi, if he would write on one paper, and through the writing it would go through 5 other papers, certainly he would be chayav. So he says, we see from that Gemara that the malach of ksiva, the malach of writing on Shabbos, is not the writing of 2 letters, but the malach of ksiva, the malach of writing on Shabbos, is the producing of 2 letters on Shabbos.
His kafana is not a factor.
Usually when a guy writes on a paper, such a paper, he knows that it's going through.
He only wants one. He's writing 1.
But he knows it will be a psik ratio.
2. Okay.
But
It's unavoidable.
If he mamish didn't realize he was writing on 2 papers, then I hear maybe it would be whatever. But it's a psik ratio. If he knew what he was doing, then at best it'd be a psik ratio. It could be it's even more. It's the actual writing. Wow. So that's the, so what do we come out? So this is up until now we have 2 chidushim in how to understand the malacha of ksiva, the malacha of writing on Shabbos. The first is the malacha, the way a person will only be over the malacha if he writes 2 letters, according to the Maggid Avos. Second of all, if a person, the malacha is not the writing of 2 letters, but the malacha is the producing of 2 letters. That's what you have. Now there's another very interesting Gemara which comes back a little bit to your question. Does a hefsek make a difference? Gemara has a shaila like this. Gemara has a case, if someone says, Kasav os achas b'Tveria. A guy was living in Eretz Yisrael and he wrote a letter in Tveria in the morning, and then v'achas b'Tzipori. He started walking and he ended up in Tzipori and he wrote a second letter there. So in Tveria in the morning he wrote a letter on 1 page, and then that afternoon, it would have to be the afternoon, it's about 50 miles away I think, so he must have, I don't know how he got there, but he got there somehow and he ended up in Tzipori, or in our terms, he wrote 1 letter on a piece of paper on the 7, and another one by Lawrence Plaza, and in the beginning of Shabbos and later on in Shabbos. What's the halacha? In that case, he wrote 2 letters. But he wrote them in 2 different places.
And 2 separate pieces of paper.
2 separate pieces of paper. Says the Gemara, he be chayiv.
Wow.
Kasav os achas b'Tveria. If you thought the carbon paper was a chiddush. Kasav os achas b'Tveria v'achas b'Tzipori, says the Gemara, chayiv. Ksiva it's ksiva. He wrote 2 letters. What's the problem? They're not next to each other, 2 pieces of paper. Elishem mechusar kreva. They're missing being connected. So we view them as being connected. Ask the Gemara on that. Whoa.
Or better than that, it's irrelevant if they're connected.
No, you'll see from the next question. We view them as connected.
So how do you have a concept of a hefsek then? You have bracha. There's no such thing as hefsek now. You're taking away the whole idea of hefsek.
So hefsek of a bracha, that has to do with you have to still be enjoying the food or still being benefiting from the food. Once the food has already been digested, it's no longer, then you can't make a bracha on it. That would be a different type of hefsek, yeah. So the Gemara says, but wait a second, that's not so simple. But now we learned in a Mishnah, Kosav al shnei koseli abayis. A person has a room and he writes on 1 wall Aleph, and on the next wall he writes a Beis. What's the halach in that case? Or al shnei dafei pinkus, or on 2 pages within like in a book. So he writes on 1 page, page 50, he writes 1 letter, page 65 he writes another letter. What's the halacha? They nagim zebazeb. The paper is halacha, he's pater. So ask the Gemara, this doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I write 1 letter in Tveria, I write 1 letter in Lawrence Plaza, and the other letter in Tzipori, and the other letter in the 7. I'm chayiv. But if I write on 2 walls, which right next to each other, pater, how does that make any sense? The Gemara says no. You totally misunderstood. When you have when you have 2 walls, you have a letter over here and a letter over there. How do you combine the 2 letters together? You would have to do. It's a major operation. You would cut out the wall, and then you could bring the wall next to the second wall. You have to do a massive work. Special tools are needed. But when if I have 2 pieces of paper that are loose pieces of paper, So it's not a big deal. So they're not connected. We view them as connected since all it's missing is bringing them together. But by a wall where I have to do a lot of work in order to bring them together, says the Gemara, that's when you're pater, because we don't see them as being attached at all.
So the connection to when the loose piece of paper has to be an intention, has to be something that exists in your mind?
It doesn't say that it has to be intention. It's just that as long as it's easily brought together. All it's missing is a guy walking, he just takes the paper with him and puts the two pieces of paper together.
So you're not, being chayav is not contingent on you intending to, those two things being connected?
You wrote two letters. You have to have intention of writing the two letters, even if you're not intending to connect them.
But it just seems impossible because no one would ever do that. So kal v'chomer, if someone would never do it paper, for sure they wouldn't do it with two walls. So they should have the same din.
So all the places are going to say this Gemara seems to have no shaykhs. It is relevant to hundreds of people every Shabbos. So let's see how we can do this. Okay, in how much time? In 15 minutes.
No, I got to know soon because I'm leaving early. So.
Oh, okay.
Sorry to be a spoiler.
If you
I gotta run.
if you don't intend to put them together, it seems like it would still be a problem. Yeah. So says the Gemara. Says now before we get to we're going to come back to this Gemara, but there's a levush. Levush says, a well-known levush, I think, you have a sefer, you have a book, and on the book it says, where I grew up, Oak Park Public Library, in Thornhill, they don't have it on their books, but it says words on the side of the page. Some people write their name there. It says the levush, what's the halacha in that case? Because what's happening, every time you open it, you're breaking apart the words, and every time you put it together, you're putting the words back. So says the levush, what's the halacha in that case? Asur lefot cham b'Shabbos mishum mochek. It's asur, says the levush, and it'll get worse. Sharei shover mochek b'osios. He's erasing letters every time you open up. Before it said Oak Park Public Library, now it says there's an N there and half of an A.
These are permanent letters, and they were made by someone else. And it wasn't even on Shabbos.
So if you're based on this argument, if you write something and I erase them on Shabbos, I wouldn't be chayav. It doesn't make a difference who wrote the letters.
I would ask the question, are they really erased? And I would even ask the question, were they ever really made? Because they're all on separate pages in the first place.
When you put them together, I could read them.
But they're not really attached in the first place. They're not glued to each other.
So we'll get to that, but do they? We're going to get to that. If you attach them, we're going to.
The question is, what does it mean to be attached?
Well, if it's legible and you make it not legible, in a sense, you have erased it. Now, is there an additional thing of attaching letters to each other that we'll get to? Hopefully, within.
I think this happened with the door, by the way. They were opening the door and they ended up in the back. So.
Oh, because of this?
I wasn't there. Someone told me I wasn't there at the time, and someone said. This is a problem. They have to
and they said it's better not to. Okay, so now hopefully we'll appreciate why.
Now, Sinai for Rosh Hashanah, they have the Machzorim, and they wrote the name of the sinner in the Machzorim. So everybody was praying for Rosh Hashanah, and suddenly, kid 5 years old came, Dad, you're breaking the letter. The whole service collapsed.
That was the end. So he says, and when you go and close them again, you're writing. And he says, you're going to tell me, and I'll prove it to you, there's a Ramah, he says, that if you have a birthday cake, if you have letters on a cake, and you cut through the letters, the Ramah says that's a problem on Shabbos. So he says this is even worse than that. Why? Because when you break the letters on a cake on Shabbos, that you did mochek, you erased. But to really be chayav for mochek, for erasing, you have to have intention to erase in order to write. Like we saw in the language of the Mishnah says, hamochek almanas lichtov shtei osios. You erase in order with the intention of clearing an area to write two letters. But over here by the cake, all you did was erase. Okay, you didn't do a good thing. But here, every time you open a book, you erase a letter, but you are planning to close the book. So it's mochik amanas lichto. So says
you're not really intending to write.
Says
and when you cut the cake, you're not erasing for the intention. Well, I don't know why. Your intention is to eat.
Attention.
And you're not going to rewrite on the cake.
Right, so that's why he says the Ramah's not as bad as this. But here you know you're going to close the book.
But you're not intention. Okay.
Here you know you're going to close the book. So he says, "V'karavani lomar shechayaven alav chatas." I consider this almost as if you're over a deraisa. That means driving a car on Shabbos, turning on a light on Shabbos, opening up a library book on Shabbos, all the same halacha.
Right.
Could be even opening up. So that's what the Levush says. Comes along and the Taz and says, I don't understand. What happened to our Gemara? What did we say in our Gemara? If a guy writes a letter in Sipori, and later that afternoon writes a letter in Tveria, or vice versa, what's the halacha? Says the Gemara that he's chayiv. What do you see from that Gemara? What was the svar of that Gemara? The svar is because it doesn't make a difference that they're not near each other. If I have two letters and all what's missing is bringing them together, I don't have to do a major operation in order to bring them together. I don't have to do a lot of work in order to bring them together. I just simply have to transport them next to each other. It's viewed as if they're together. So says the Taz, from that Gemara we should see that it's mutter to open up a library book on Shabbos, or a book with lettering on Shabbos. Why? Because what did I do? All I did was separate the letters. But the Gemara tells us if letters are near each other, even if they're not near each other, as long as I have letters written, they're viewed as being near each other. So if I could be mechayev a person like the Gemara in Shabbos, certainly I could say it's mutter. It's all the same svar, says the Taz. So you see the Gemara that seemed so far-fetched has very practical ramifications. If a guy opens up a library book on Shabbos, says the Taz, it should be mutter because I have half the lettering here, half the lettering there, and it's viewed as being attached. I said, what does the Levush hold? So the Taz continues and says, you're going to tell me that you can't compare what does one thing have to do with the other? By the case in the Gemara, what do I have? I have a complete letter in Sipori. I have a complete letter in Tveria. So when I have two complete letters, so I could see them as being attached. But in a case of a book with lettering on the side of a book, I don't have any complete letter. I have half of a letter here and half of a letter there. Who said that I view two half letters as being attached to each other? And therefore that's the svar of the Levush, the Taz says, but I disagree. Says the Taz, I don't buy such a svar, and therefore I think it's mutter. Having two half letters and having two complete letters in different places, it could be seen as all being attached. And therefore, the Taz says opening such a book on Shabbos is okay. What about the cutting a cake? So he says cutting a cake, you can never reattach a cake. If you ever cut a cake, right? It's loose, and then the letters become distorted. You can never put the cake back together, and therefore says the Taz, it's mutter to opening a book, even though it should be usher to cut a cake through the letter on Shabbos. So what do we have? Over here we have, so the Taz's shita is, if I have everyone seems to agree, if I have two complete letters in different sides of the world, I view them as being attached. So therefore, if I were to attach two letters that were complete, no problem. But if I have a half a letter, or in the case of a book, I have a letter cut into 300 pieces, since, according to the Taz, I could view that as complete letters, and according to Levush, that would be a problem. And according to Levush, he considers it to be like an Isser D'Oraisa, and according to the Taz, it's perfectly mutter. That's what comes out of this halacha. So what would happen? So what would happen? Like if you have someone speaking to me about a Scrabble board. So what's the problem when you write Scrabble? So you spell it with a good word quiz on a triple letter score. So you get almost close to 100 points, but you also write out a word. So would that be a problem on Shabbos to play Scrabble on Shabbos? You're writing a word. So it would seem based on this, according to everyone, it should be okay. Why? Because according to Levush, I have two letters. Two letters are always viewed as being attached to each other. Even though they're not, there's no problem of connecting two letters next to each other, placing them next to each other. According to the Taz, right, it's no difference than having one letter in Sipori and a different letter in Tveria. And then bringing them together, since the Gemara says two letters in two different places are seen as being attached. So I'm not writing out a word. So therefore when I put the Scrabble pieces next to each other, I haven't done anything. And certainly according to the Taz, even if I have half a letter, it should be okay. to play with Scrabble on Shabbos, because I'm just again connecting letters which halachically is seen as being connected, and therefore it would seem that Scrabble would be permitted on Shabbos. So what do we have? To play Scrabble on Shabbos would seem to be okay, and to open up a library book where I have half letters, broken letters, I'm completing letters on Shabbos, that would be a machlokes Taz and Levush.
Why did this Scrabble?
I thought we concluded that when you write one letter over here and later on Shabbos you write another letter another place, Lord and Plaza,
then he's chayav.
Then you're chayav.
Right.
But now you're saying
that's where I wrote the letters. By Scrabble I have the letters, and now I'm creating a word. So since over there I view as the letters that I wrote on Shabbos to be connected, so it's if I wrote two letters next to each other, when I have two letters that are already written before Shabbos, I also see them as next to each other. So I didn't write the word quiz. The word quiz was already written before Shabbos.
But it wasn't.
I just made the shit up.
They were scrambled up and you assembled them that way. We assume that every
letter, every combination.
We assume every combination, every written possible letter's there.
Yeah, I mean every word, every letter, every combination of letters there's connected next to each other. I didn't write a new word. I didn't create a new letter. They're all next to each other.
But you didn't write at all.
I didn't write it at all.
You didn't write.
No, I wrote out a word before it said.
Write out a word.
Before it said Q-U.
But it comes back to your idea of you had a 5 and a G. It had no meaning. You put the two together, it has a meaning.
That's when I wrote it on Shabbos. But now it's as if I had the Avnei Nezer will tell you if I have a 5 and a G before Shabbos, I could put them together. That's what he would tell you. But to create a 5 and a G on separate sides of the world, that would be a problem because it's viewed as being together.
So Scrabble's okay.
Scrabble. We'll get to a different type of Scrabble in a second.
So that's why the sitter is okay with the word because they existed before.
They existed before, and when I open,
Scrabble didn't exist before.
There's
a pile of these little tiles, right?
Right.
So you're saying, by definition of nature, there's a pile of these tiles. Every single word you could conceive is actually there already.
It's there already. Because
in fact, you have to assemble them, and the order doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's viewed as being like that before Shabbos. That's the just like when I have two letters on other sides of, you can't say they're next to each other. They don't. When one sees one letter, he definitely doesn't see the other letter. They're 30 miles away. Still, it's being together.
What's the Havamina that Scrabble should be writing?
Because I wrote this is the Havamina. I take a pile of letters.
Right, though. You didn't.
Sure, I have a bunch of writing. No, but I did. I took a bunch of symbols which have no meaning.
That's not writing.
I put it together, and now I've created something that has meaning.
You still didn't write. You didn't take the thing and write. You didn't write.
Yeah, but so writing doesn't have to be necessarily with the pen. Writing doesn't have to be necessarily with the pen. Any form of writing could be a problem with Shabbos.
Communicating a message.
Let's say.
That's what I'm saying. It's not physically writing.
Right.
Communicating a message.
Right. Now you created something which drawing a picture. We'll see in a second. That's also.
So you have to, in order for this to work, you have to assume that every single letter or message or symbol all over the world, by every human being, all over the universe, are all connected. They're all connected.
As long as you don't have to do a major job in order to bring them together.
Thereof also exists.
Right. You don't have to bring them together. All you're doing is just bringing them together, which we've seen as being together.
You can communicate through anything that already exists.
As long as you don't have to do a major job in order to bring them together.
What about a thing like dominoes we put together? Well, it's not letters, it's circles.
What would be the problem?
Two circles next to another piece that has two circles.
But there you're not.
There's no words.
Right, so that should be.
That's fine.
That should be fine. We're running out of time. But what about like we mentioned, there's a problem of drawing a picture on Shabbos because a picture you're giving has meaning. So the poskim discuss what about making a puzzle on Shabbos. So you have a puzzle, so you have all these different pieces which they by themselves have no meaning, but there used to be a picture there which has been broken, and now the point of a puzzle is you reconnect to recreate the picture.
So like the Scrabble, it's already there, just mixed up.
So that's
What's the difference?
Okay, fine. So here is a little more complicated, because why? What?
Isn't it an issue of constructing also? Not building.
Okay. You gotta say it's but here's more complicated because what do you have? You don't have a complete picture. You don't have two complete pictures that you're putting together. Here I have like a broken letter. It's like I have pieces that make up one complete picture. So Kubi here is worse. because I don't have any. By the case of Scrabble, I'm taking two complete letters and putting them next to each other. By the case of a puzzle, I'm taking two half pictures and putting them together to create a picture. So could be this is worse, and really this would go back to the machlokas Lavush and the Taz. According to the Taz, who says that even broken letters at different parts of the world could be seen as being together to form one letter, then a puzzle is just like that. I have broken parts of a picture, it could be seen as attached to each other. But according to Lavush, who says that opening up a book, which would then separate a letter into two different parts, that would be that over here by a puzzle, I don't see as broken pieces of a letter to be attached to each other, and therefore to make a puzzle, according to Lavush, would certainly be a problem. But according to the Taz, it could be argued that it would be okay.
Don't you know when it says it's a problem, taking a puzzle apart, would that be mechika then?
That would be mechika, yeah. Anything that's writing to the opposite would be mechika, yeah. So it would seem like it's a machlokas Taz and Shach, Taz and Lavush. However, that's all true if the pieces don't fit into each other. But if the pieces fit into each other, now they become attached to each other. There's another consideration, because there's a Magen Avram who brings a raya from the Gemara in Gittin that placing letters next to each other is okay. But attaching letters to each other, let's say you pin letters up to a board next to each other, or in the case of a puzzle, you connect them to each other before they were loose letters and now they're attached to each other, not just, or in the case of Scrabble Deluxe, they're stuck to something, right? They have a little square and all the letters are stuck there. So then the Magen Avram says such a thing would be Asar on Shabbos. Because there I did something more. Meaning, if I have two letters on opposite sides of the world, so when I put them next to each other, so all it was missing is them being next to each other, so I put them together, no big deal. But when I attach them to each other, then I've done something significant that wasn't there before Shabbos. And therefore such a thing, that would be a problem on Shabbos. So a puzzle then would come out, it's a machlokas Magen Avram and Taz, and therefore the Shmir Shabbos Kolchasa Paskins, that a katan, a minor, would be allowed to make a puzzle on Shabbos, but an adult should not do so on Shabbos, whatever, at least the Chatchila shouldn't do so on Shabbos. And those are just, look at these, two more, so that's, okay, just, I have till, what?
Another 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay. So just one last question that I heard from Rabbi Franz. If a person's reading a sefer, instead of one last question, so what's halacha l'maisa? How do we paskin about all this? This I think could be more. So the Mishnah Berurah writes, he says like this. So what happens? So we have just different shadows. So just to review quickly, and then we'll come out. What do we come out the halacha? So we have over here, by opening up books, we said everyone agrees by two letters different that you're bringing together, not attaching together, that would be okay. Both the Lavush and the Taz both agree that bringing two letters together is okay. If you have to attach two letters together, then now you can't disconnect them easily. That would be a machlokas Magen Avram and Taz, and the Shmir Shabbos Kolchasa Paskin, at least by a puzzle, that a person that should be choshesh for the Taz, but for a katan it's no problem to make a puzzle on Shabbos. Now what would be if I have broken letters and put broken letters next to each other? So let's say in the case of a book or in a sefer, so there the halacha is, we said it's a machlokas Lavush and Taz. According to Lavush, broken letters are not considered to be attached to each other, and according to the Taz, it would be permitted no different than having two separate letters would be. So how do we paskin all this? The Mishnah Berurah writes, he brings down the whole case. The Ramah and the Tshuva is Mekel, V'chein das harbi achronim are more lenient, V'taimim, and he says a reason, V'chein aminuk. And that's the minig is to be Mekel, to be lenient. Mikol Makom, so why did they return the Svarim, the Siddur in your case? What happened? Mikol Makom nachon lahachmer kishiyesh la sefer acher. Still, if you have a different book, a different sefer, then you should be more machmer. So if I have an option of reading the same, if I have a chumash with letters and a chumash without letters, so it's better to, it's nachal lahachmer, says the Mishnah Berurah, and choose the sefer, the chumash without letters. So if I have a library book and a different book, and I'm going to anyways read these two books, so it's better on Shabbos to read the book which doesn't have the lettering at the side. But if I'm in a place where I don't have this book, and someone comes in with this book, and lo and behold, it has lettering on the side, there, I'm not going to get it later. Then, says the Mishnah Berurah, the minig is to be mekel. There, I don't have a different sefer. And therefore, it would seem, according to this Mishnah Berurah, one would be able to rely on that and read such a book on Shabbos.
What is lettering